So, having discussed about the first 4 subtopics in physiology, now let's look on to what all are remaining. So actually at the beginning of the physiology session itself, I have told you that physiology is actually just an extension of the unit you have already studied in your +1 biology, that is human physiology. So you have learned about human physiology. What we are learning here is actually just an extension. So in that unit you have learned a chapter called body fluid and circulation. So corresponding to that, we have blood physiology. Okay, so it will be dealing with different bloodlines. You know that we have 3 types of bloodlines: RBCs, WBCs and platelets. Those are the predominant 3 types of cells in blood. So we will be learning in detail about these 3 cell lines. Okay, so you will be learning about hematopoiesis. So what does the word hematopoiesis means? It's conveyed in the word itself. Hemato means something related to blood. Okay, poiesis means synthesis. So hematopoiesis, it simply means it's synthesis of RBCs. Okay, it's the synthesis of RBCs. Then you will be learning about immunity. You know, where there are different types of immunity. You have learned it in the chapter Human Health and Diseases. Okay, and finally you will also learn about coagulation. So actually you have learned a little bit about coagulation in your +1 biology, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, in here you will be learning in detail about coagulation. We have 2 types of pathway: intrinsic pathway and extrinsic pathway. Okay, so you'll be learning in detail about that. Now, in your +1 biology, you had a chapter called breathing and exchange of gases. So corresponding to that, we have respiratory system here. So here you will be learning in detail about the respiratory system. So here you will be learning about the transport of gases. So you know that you have learned about the transport of both oxygen and carbon dioxide. So partly it's almost the same that you have learned in your +1. Here also it's almost same, but you will be learning in a more detailed manner. Okay, transport of oxygen, oxyhemoglobin, carboxyhemoglobin and all. Okay, not carboxyhemoglobin, carbaminohemoglobin. What's the difference? Carbon dioxide bound to hemoglobin is called carbaminohemoglobin. Carbon monoxide bound to hemoglobin is called carboxyhemoglobin. Okay, oxygen bound to hemoglobin is called oxyhemoglobin. So you'll be learning about that. And further on, you will be learning about the regulation of respiration, which is extremely important, because in certain cases patients die because of loss of this regulation. Because of, if somebody gets a hit on the back of the head, you might have heard about that famous comedy, right? If I get a hit on my medulla oblongata, I'll die immediately. It's actually because the regulation of respiration is gone. You know that the respiratory centers are in the medulla. Okay, so that's about the respiratory system. Now, again, going back to your +1 biology, you have learned a chapter called neural control and coordination. So corresponding to that, we have here the chapter called nervous system. So in the nervous system, as you know, we have the peripheral nervous system and the central nervous system. So you'll be learning in detail about that. So you'll be learning about synapses. You know what synapses are. Synapses are basically just the junctions of neurons. Then you'll be learning about different types of receptors. Okay, we have different types of receptors. We have receptors for touch. For touch itself, we have different types of receptors. We have receptor for taste, smell, vision and all. Okay, so you'll be learning in detail about that. Then you have the sensory system and the motor system, and we have certain pathways in sensory system and motor system. For example, we have to carry pain and temperature, we have a pathway called lateral spinothalamic tract. To carry sensations like pressure, touch and vibration, we have a tract called the posterior column. Okay, to carry the motor pathways, we have something called the pyramidal tract. So just be sensitized with the words. You will be learning about this in detail. So you will be having the sensory and motor system. Then you will be having the cranial nerves and the parts and functions of brain. Okay, so about cranial nerves, actually, I think cranial nerves are not mentioned in NCERT. During my studies, it was certainly not mentioned. I'm not sure whether they have added it recently or not. That's why I'm telling you that. But some coaching institutes might have taught you the cranial nerves. Even if not, this is important. So before you enter your MBBS life or before you start your first year, knowing about the cranial nerves is essential. So I have just included a slide to discuss about the cranial nerves. Okay, that we'll be discussing. Okay, because it's not included in the NCERT, but you need it as a basic. That's why we'll be discussing the cranial nerves in the coming slide. Okay, then you have again studied a chapter in the human physiology which is called digestion and absorption. So corresponding to that, we here have the gastrointestinal system. We here have the gastrointestinal system. Okay, so here you will be learning about peristalsis. You know that the peristalsis is simply the gut movement. So peristalsis is just only one type of gut movement. We have different types of gut movement. Okay, it's called segmentation, contraction, migratory motor complexes. We have different types of gut movements. So you'll be learning about that. Then we will be learning about the endocrine function of the GIT. So it's a separate topic, it's a separate short essay, endocrine function of GIT. You know that we have certain hormones called gastrin, secretin, cholesterol, and you might have you have already learned about these hormones. In short, in your plus 2 biology, we'll be learning about that in details. Then you will be learning about the digestion of different micronutrients. This also you have learned. You know that we have the certain enzymes we have called amylases, lipases, peptidases and all. So you will be learning about digestion of different micronutrients. Now, you have learned a chapter called chemical control and coordination. So you have learned about chemical control and coordination, in which you studied about hormones. So regarding that, we have here I have a chapter called, or a unit called endocrinology. So endocrinology basically means, endocrine simply means something related to the study of hormones. Okay, so anything related to study of hormones is called endocrinology. So here you will be learning about temperature regulation, how the normal homeostasis, there is something called homeostasis. Okay, you will learn about it. Okay, you might have already know the term homeostasis. You will learn in detail about homeostasis. So one essential component of homeostasis is maintenance of normal body temperature. Okay, the body temperature should not be extremely warm, should not be extremely cold, it should be optimal. So to keep that optimal temperature regulation, we have certain mechanisms. So you will be learning that. Then you will be learning about the endocrine organs. You already know that there are different organs like pituitary, thyroid, and there are different hormones, and you have already learned about the functions. So we will be learning it in detail. And in your second year biology, you have learned about human reproduction. You have 2 chapters regarding human reproduction and reproductive health. So you'll be learning about reproductive physiology, that how a normal menstruation occurs, how a normal ovulation occurs, how is the fertilization and all. You'll be learning here. Okay, so that's in short. So these 2 slides, okay, so these 2 slides covers the basic what all subtopics you have to learn in physiology. Now, as I have promised, let's move on to the cranial nerves. So as I said before, all of you might not be knowing about cranial nerves. Some of you might be knowing. So our purpose here is to make everybody know about the cranial nerves. So we actually have 12 pair of cranial nerves. Okay, we have cranial nerves and we have spinal nerves. Of that cranial nerves, there are 12 pair of cranial nerves, and each of these cranial nerves has got different function. Okay, now in this figure I have, the figure shows the section of the brain. Okay, here in this figure, the figure shows the section of the brain. So all the cranial nerves reaches the brain. Actually, it's not true, because olfactory nerve doesn't reach the brain. It's actually synapsed in the olfactory bulb itself, but it's a little complex. Don't take it to that level now. But for this point, just remember that cranial nerves arises from the brain. We just need to know that at this point, that the cranial nerves arises from the brain, and they are numbered from the number 1 to number 12 based on their position. Okay, they are numbered from number 1 to number 12 based on their position. So the first cranial nerve is called the olfactory. So I'll just list it out first. The first one is called olfactory, second one is called optic, third one is called oculomotor, fourth one is called trochlear, fifth one is called trigeminal, sixth one is called abducens, seventh one is called facial, eighth one is called vestibulocochlear, ninth one is called glossopharyngeal, 10th one is called vagus, 11th one is called spinal accessory, and 12th one is called hypoglossal. Okay, so these are the cranial nerves. So we'll just write it here. What color we'll take? Okay. So olfactory is our first cranial nerve, optic is our second cranial nerve, oculomotor is our third cranial nerve, trochlear is our fourth cranial nerve, trigeminal is my fifth, and trigeminal is the thickest cranial nerve. Okay, trigeminal is my fifth cranial nerve, abducens is my sixth cranial nerve, facial is my seventh cranial nerve, vestibulocochlear is my eighth cranial nerve, glossopharyngeal is my ninth cranial nerve, vagus is my 10th cranial nerve. The order is reverse here. Spinal accessory is my 11th cranial nerve. Okay, not hypoglossal. Spinal accessory is my 11th cranial nerve, and hypoglossal is my 12th cranial nerve. Okay, hypoglossal is my 12th cranial nerve. So these are the 12 cranial nerves. Even at your sleep, you should be able to name the cranial nerves, because you are a doctor. Okay, you are supposed to know the name of every cranial nerve and its every function, the anatomy and all. When you have completed MBBS, you need to know every clinical aspects of the cranial nerves. But at the level of first year, you should know the name of the cranial nerve, its function, and its basic. There is a structure for every cranial nerve. Okay, there is an anatomy of cranial nerve. You should know that. Okay, so I'll just list out the function of cranial nerves in short here. Okay, so I told you that the first cranial nerve is called the olfactory cranial nerve. So its function is smell. Okay, actually the cranial nerves have got different functions, but at this point we just want to mention the main functions here. So the first cranial nerve or the olfactory nerve, its function is the smell. The second cranial nerve is the optic. Second cranial nerve is the optic, and yes, the name suggests the function of optic nerve is vision. Okay, olfactory nerve is for smell, optic is for vision. Now I'll write it in a different color. Okay, why I am writing in different color, I'll tell you. So the third cranial nerve is called oculomotor. So the name itself, oculo means eye, motor means movement. So the function of oculomotor is movement of eye, but I'll write it later. Now the fourth one, the cranial nerve is called the trochlear nerve. Okay, the fourth one is called the trochlear nerve. Function I'll write later. Fifth one is called the trigeminal nerve. Fifth one is called the trigeminal nerve. Sixth one is called the abducens. This one is called the abducens. Now, I have written three cranial nerves in different color: oculomotor, trochlear, and abducens. It's because all those three carry same function. These three, not trigeminal, okay? These three cranial nerves carry same function, and that function is movement of eye. Okay, so movement of eye is a complicated purpose. Okay, movement of eye is actually a complicated process, and that's why movement of eye requires many cranial nerves to function. So oculomotor, trochlear, and abducens, the function of all these three cranial nerves is movement of the eye. Okay, actually there is a code for this, that is called the LR6 SO4 thrice. Okay, this is called mnemonic. I have already introduced you to mnemonic. I have showed you the bones of carpal bones. They are named she looks too pretty, try to catch her, right? Scaphoid, lunate, tricutal, pisiform, trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, hamate. The mnemonic was she looks too pretty, try to catch her. So similar to that, here we have a short form to learn which all movements of eye is done by which all, or which all the muscles of eye is controlled by which all cranial nerves. Okay, so for that we have a short form called LR6 SO4 thrice. So actually it means, I'll just tell you because you will not be able to understand it completely because you don't know the names of muscles of eye. Okay, that's why you will not be able to understand it completely, but just for to introduce you to the world of mnemonics or the world how to study MBBS, how to learn in MBBS, I'll just be describing it. So here LR means lateral rectus. So lateral rectus is actually a muscle, and SO means superior oblique. SO means superior oblique. So these two are actually muscles. Lateral rectus and superior oblique are muscles. So what it means, LR6 means lateral rectus is controlled by the sixth cranial nerve. That means my sixth cranial nerve is abducens. Okay. Now SO4, SO means superior oblique. Superior oblique is controlled by the fourth cranial nerve. That means it is controlled by the fourth trochlear. And LR6 SO4, the whole the bracket thrice. Thrice means all the other muscles of eye is controlled by my third cranial nerve, oculomotor. Okay, so that's the equation, or that's the mnemonic here. So this is a very famous mnemonic. You will hear it in the beginning of your first year itself. Okay, you will hear the mnemonic LR6 SO4 thrice in the beginning itself because it's a very famous mnemonic and it's a very useful mnemonic. Okay, so my lateral rectus muscle is controlled by the sixth cranial nerve, my superior oblique is controlled by the fourth cranial nerve, and all the other muscles are controlled by the third cranial nerve. Okay, so even if you are not able to understand this, it's absolutely fine because you don't know the muscles of eye. I just wanted to introduce you to the world of mnemonics or to the world of equations, or I just wanted to convey you how to learn all these facts. Okay, because we have many facts too. All these are not like something like physics or maths that we can derive. Okay, many of these are facts, and to learn facts we need many tricks. Okay, so these are some of the tricks. Okay. So we have discussed the function of olfactory, optic, oculomotor, trochlear, and abducens. Now trigeminal is remaining here, right? So the function of trigeminal is, I'll write here, or we can write here. Okay, we can write here. So the function of trigeminal is actually the sensory and motor supply to face. Okay, so all my sensations from face is carried by the trigeminal nerve. and the movements that I make with my muscles in the face. For example, I am protracting, okay, I am opening my jaw, I am closing my jaw, I am clenching my teeth. These all are done by my muscles of trigeminal. Okay, these all are done by the trigeminal. But there are certain movements in the face which is controlled by muscles, which is controlled by the facial nerve also. That is called the facial muscles. The trigeminal muscles, trigeminal actually controls the muscles which are called the muscles of mastication. That means the muscles which are required for chewing. So the muscles which are required for chewing, opening, closing, all those are controlled by the trigeminal. You don't know, no need of knowing it in the detail because you will learn it later. But just know that trigeminal helps for the sensory and motor supply to face. Okay, trigeminal helps for the sensory and motor supply to face. Sensory means it takes the sensation, it takes the touch sensation, it takes the pain sensation from my face to my brain, and it helps for the movement of muscles of mastication, muscles used for chewing. Abducens we have already discussed. Now let's come on to the 7th cranial nerve. So the 7th cranial nerve is called the facial nerve. The 7th cranial nerve is called the facial nerve, and as I have told you before, the function of facial nerve is to control the facial muscles. For example, for helping me to smile, okay, for example, to close my eyelids, okay, or for example, I had to close my mouth, okay. So for actions like this, we have the facial nerve. For the actions like this, we have the facial nerve, and facial nerve helps for the movement of the facial muscles. So the movement of my face is actually controlled by two nerve. It's actually one by trigeminal nerve. Trigeminal helps for the movement of muscles of mastication. That means the muscles of chewing, and facial nerve helps for the facial movements. Okay, facial movements, closing my eye, closing my mouth, smiling, all that is done by the facial nerve. Now, my 8th cranial nerve is vestibulocochlear nerve. Vestibulocochlear nerve, and from this name itself you have the vestibular and the cochlear. That means it is which is innervate the ear. So for my hearing and balancing purpose, I have the vestibulocochlear nerve. So you know that the ear has two functions. Apart from hearing, it also has the function of balance. So vestibulo means balance, cochlear means hearing. So 8th nerve helps for hearing and balance. My 9th nerve is called the glossopharyngeal nerve. Glossopharyngeal nerve. Glosso means tongue. Glosso means tongue. Pharyngeal means pharynx. So this is the nerve which carry taste sensation from tongue. Okay. So glossopharyngeal carries taste sensation from tongue. Now 10th I have the vagus nerve. And vagus nerve actually has a lot of functions. Okay, vagus nerve is a complicated nerve. It has got a lot of functions. But the main thing I would say, the function of vagus is parasympathetic function. So you know that our autonomic nervous system has a sympathetic component and a parasympathetic component. Okay, so the function of vagus is parasympathetic control of the body. Okay, I would say body, it has got wide variety of functions. Vagus nerve has got a lot of functions. It has got different functions in different parts of body. But overall, we can say the function of vagus nerve is parasympathetic. That means if my sympathetic system gets activated, for example, my heart rate increases, vagus nerve gets stimulated and it suppresses the heart rate. Okay, it suppresses the BP. Okay, so the function of parasympathetic is, the function of vagus nerve is the parasympathetic function. Now I have the 11th cranial nerve, which is called the spinal accessory nerve. So it actually supplies two muscles in the neck. Name just you here, don't need to write. Name is the sternocleidomastoid. So this muscle is called the sternocleidomastoid, and this muscle, the muscle of Batista. You know the fighter WWE star Batista, no? So one of his muscle is very prominent. That muscle is called the trapezius. So this muscle, that is trapezius, and this muscle, that is sternocleidomastoid. These two are supplied by the spinal accessory nerve. So I'll just write it supplies the muscles of neck. At this point, that's sufficient. Okay, no need of the name of the muscles. Spinal accessory nerve supplies the muscles of the neck. Now, finally, I have the 12th nerve, which is called the hypoglossal nerve. So here again you have got glossal. Here also you have got glossal. Glossal means glossal means tongue. So glossopharyngeal, in this nerve, glosso was meaning it carries taste sensation from tongue. And here again we have got glossal. So glossal means tongue. So the function of hypoglossal nerve is movement of tongue. One was taste sensation from tongue. second is movement of tongue. So spinal glossopharyngeal is for the taste sensation, hypoglossal is for the movement of tongue. Both supplies the tongue. One is for sensory, one is for motor. Glossopharyngeal is for sensory, taste sensation, and hypoglossal is for movement of tongue. So these are the cranial nerves in short. Okay, so this is the most summarized form of cranial nerves. These are the this is the basics that you are supposed to know before entering MBBS. Okay, we have 12 pair of cranial nerves, and each of them has got distinct function. Okay, is that clear? So I'm not repeating it because I have already multiple times I have named the nerves and the function. We have already discussed it in detail. So olfactory for smell, optic for vision, oculomotor, trochlear and abducens for eye movements. Remember LR6 SO for thrice, trigeminal for the sensory and motor system of face. So facial nerve for facial muscles, vestibulocochlear for hearing and balance, glossopharyngeal for taste, vagus for mainly parasympathetic activity, spinal axillary for the movement of muscles of tongue, that is sternocleidomastoid and trapezius, and the hypoglossal for the movement of tongue. Okay, so with that we are coming an end to the physiology session also. So as I told before, physiology we are not discussing as vast as anatomy because of two reasons. One is I have told you that 70% of your first year syllabus is going to be anatomy. Okay, 70, let's say 60% of your first year subject is going to be anatomy. So anatomy is what is we have to stress more, even though the marks are same for the final year exam, and you are going to learn more time, you are going to invest more time in anatomy. The second one is you don't know anything about anatomy. For physiology, as far as physiology and biochemistry is concerned, you have learned something basic about it in your higher secondary education itself. But as far as anatomy is considered, many terms are new for you. That's why I have spent or invested more time in anatomy and lesser time in physiology and biochemistry. Okay, so I hope what we have discussed in physiology is clear to everyone.